I became a pre-scientist in one of the earliest Kushite Nile Valley civilizations, Kushana. Ancient legends from migrations many thousands of years earlier spoke of a great landmass on the far side of the world and a great mystical bear known as Batalis. The journey to reach the unknown world was long and treacherous and could take years, traveling by boat, camel, horse, wagon, and on foot. I was one of the first priests to train in the warrior predator sect, which had its mystical beginnings in eastern and southern Africa. After acquiring the ability of invisibility, I was ready to select the predator archetype to bring about the merger of my spiritual essence. Born as an ancient Ethiopian Kushite of Punt, I was given extensive training in the use of the bow and arrow, sword, and hand-to-hand combat. My choice of Batalis meant that I would have to travel an enormous distance, encountering extreme weather, both hostile and friendly nations, and unknown dangerous animals along the way. It was a choice that many of my brother priests questioned, but they also understood that this was my calling, and that I had to risk everything to follow the path of my ancestors who made the trek and never returned, beginning new nations in unknown lands. The Great Migration Exodus that witnessed large groups of African people, men, women, and children, leaving the motherland to start new nations, have been ongoing for thousands of years, with some explorers returning with tales of virgin territories, mammoth creatures, and supernatural events. I felt a burning desire to see the unknown worlds and to witness the power and strength of the mythical and mighty Batalis. The ancient trek took me through the early settlements of the ancient black nations of Kerma, Kemet, Kush, Elam, Sumer, Canaan, Colchis, Kassite, and other ancient cities and nation-states. In the lower Hapi Valley, I saw the first Kushite settlements in a lush green environment. The Great Sphinx, Horamakhet, had not been carved yet out of the massive rock that occupied the Giza Plateau. The black inhabitants in the settlements near the Tigris and Euphrates rivers were friendly, hospitable, and offered generous help. I lived among them for several months to prepare for the most troublesome part of the ancient migration. The few warriors and explorers that had returned over the centuries provided terrestrial and astronomical details and maps on how to reach the crossing point to the unknown world. There in the first landing is a place the ancients called Casca. This, they said, was the home and territory of Batalis. They gave me several warnings about the northern barbaric tribes, many of whom lived in caves, ate the raw flesh of animals, and sometimes the raw flesh of their enemies, as well as drink their blood. These were not human beings, but were beast-like humanoids. I was also warned about what I would encounter beyond the ancient hills and into the far reaches of the ice valleys. There, wild mammoth animals roamed the land, creatures and animals that were much larger than those in the motherland. The mega beasts were large woolly mastodons, cave lions, the saber-toothed tiger, giant sloths, large woolly rhinoceros, huge cave bears, giant elks, and wolf packs numbering 20 or more, double the size of an ordinary wolf. With such adversaries living throughout this desolate land, known as the Ghostland Iceland, what would later become known as Siberia, many stressed the constant danger of traveling alone by foot with a limited defense system. The ancient Africans who survived the trek traveled in large numbers and were well armed with many warriors. No one expected a single warrior, no matter how strong and determined he would be, to survive such an ordeal. I was told that entering Ghostland during the spring months offered the best strategy for surviving the journey. By foot, they estimated that the entire journey could take over 1 year, yet I was planning to do it in less than 7 months. After leaving the temperate lands of the Magans and Acadians, I began the ascent into the colder climates, further into the Forbidden Lands. There I encountered the 7-foot-tall beast-like humanoids with white complexions hunting large mammoths, using primitive spears and clubs as weapons. Cloaked in invisibility, I watched their actions, listened to their language, observed their family structure, eating habits, and cave dwellings. The most feared predators were the wolf packs, saber-toothed tigers, and cave lions. It was a harsh environment. The snow and ice were a constant reminder of the bitter realities that all living organisms had to endure to survive. The caves offered the best refuge at night for sleep and shelter. However, the tribes and most predators were also using the caves for the same purposes. By using my special powers of invisibility and blocking the scent of my presence, I could occupy caves that were used by the humanoids and vicious animals. Sleeping in such conditions was a dangerous affair. Sometimes I suffered extreme exhaustion, insomnia, panic attacks, and phobias. Adding to my difficulties and change in lifestyle was the need to become more like a wild predator, scavenging food and animal fur after a major kill. I had to devise special methods to cook my meat without a campfire being discovered by the predators and hostile tribes. Whenever I could find plant food, nuts, and seeds, I would have a feast and store as much as I could in special hiding places. Sometimes I slept in trees during daylight hours or at night when I could not find suitable cave dwellings. 9 months into my journey, I witnessed a major battle between two tribes, numbering 50 to 75 members in each tribe. All the male members of the defeated tribe were beheaded, and they took the women and children as slaves. A blood-drinking ceremony took place inside of the victor's cave, using the defeated leader's blood and his body as part of a special feast, celebrating their glorious victory. This was hard to witness, but it was another lesson to be learned as a warrior predator priest. These harsh and brutal realities of life in the wild were not to be avoided. Various elements trapped me in the extreme cold of the winter months, which delayed my deadline for leaving Ghostland. With the predator big cats and wolves constantly searching for scarce food and the weather ultra cold, 50 degrees below zero, I wanted to find a permanent shelter to avoid the frostbite and losing limbs. As the enormous bears hibernated in their specially selected caves high in the mountains, I joined them, using spiritual methods to lower the metabolic rate of my body to induce the hibernation factor for the human biological system. And like the bears, I had been increasing my body fat before the winter months, so I was ready to descend into inactivity for as long as would be necessary. I kept a special store of nuts, seeds, and water nearby, in case I needed to replenish body nutrients during the long-term ordeal. I picked a spot on a ridge overlooking the area where the bears were hibernating, digging out a den similar to how the individual bears were digging their dens in special spots in the cave. 9 full-grown bears and their cubs occupied this partially vegetated, spacious environment. In the ceiling and on the walls of the cave gathered hundreds of bats that were also hibernating through the winter months. It was unlikely that other predators would enter this cave with the scent of full-grown bears gathered as a clan. I reasoned that this would be a secure environment to experience deep sleep. I found that with the lower bodily functions and metabolic rate, the body could remain semi-lifeless, with brief periodic requirements for water and minimal food substance. As a part of my training as a priest, I had learned how to fast for very long periods, even dry fasting without food and water for as long as 20 days. My prior spiritual and scientific training had prepared me for this special ordeal. The cave was cold and damp, but it offered a haven from the brutal snowstorms and severe cold in the outside environment. I used rocks and many animal furs to insulate myself from the cold and to provide a cover to hide my presence. Ghostland Iceland proved to be one of the most inhospitable places on the planet. After 5 months of hibernation, the bears began moving about slowly, taking weeks to emerge from their dens. With spring came a warmer climate and the growth of vegetation, berries, nuts, seeds, and various other types of edible plants. I was near death when I awakened to the sounds of life and movement taking place in the cave. The bears were speaking to each other and taking the first steps towards rejoining the natural flow of life. I had lost over half my body weight, emaciated to the point of crawling to get to a place outside the cave. With my power to summon invisibility diminished, one of the enormous bears soon discovered my presence. The bear approached me, but not in a menacing way. His intention was one of curiosity and understanding. He spoke to me mentally, and somehow I understood his language. You lived with us during the time of our deep slumber. You are not one of the beastmen. Who are you? And where do you come from? Speak, creature, and I may spare your life. My name is Esau, and I come from the motherland far to the west. My journey is to reach the crossing point to enter the unknown world in the land we call Casca, where the great bear Batalis lives. Upon hearing the name Batalis, the enormous bear stood up on his hind legs, towering 8 feet above me, and declared, "Batalis is the god king of all bears, not knowing death, invincible and all-powerful. Why would a puny creature such as you seek a supreme being? Before I could answer, I collapsed into a coma that lasted for many days. The bears took care of me and nursed me back to life. During the time of my recovery, I explained my mission and why I needed to meet Batalis. The bears welcomed and protected me from the other predators as they foraged in the forest and hunted for prey animals. When I had fully recovered and was ready to make my trek to the crossing point, I was escorted by 2 fully grown bears of the clan to a point not far from my destination. There beyond the large mountain range is your destination. We cannot go any further. Beware of the wolf packs and the large cats that live near the sacred mound, the bears said as they departed. As I watched the 2 bears depart, I felt the spirit of the clan leave me, for these bears had become my brothers. I had learned many things living among the bears, most importantly, how I should approach Batalis, and the way I would need to communicate my mission. In Casca, and throughout much of the Asmonean kingdom, Batalis is the supreme ruler of the animal kingdom. Most of the other mega bears, wolf packs, and big cats respected his dominance. Cloaked in invisibility, I reached the sacred mound, which was a collapsed, dormant volcano. In a matter of days, I crept through the forest and flatlands, avoiding all predators, finally climbing the rugged and jagged pathways to the summit of the sacred mound overlooking the crossing point. Just as the ancients foretold, a secret cavern in the upper mouth of the volcano contained ancient writings and drawings of those who had passed this way many thousands of years earlier. They were the most honored ancient ancestors, the early explorers who had survived the Ghostland and crossed over to the Asmonean kingdom. With a torchlight, I walked slowly through the winding entranceway leading downward to the cavern, observing the signs, drawings, and symbolic language along the way. In observing the pictures, I saw they told a story of the ancestors' journey, their trials and tribulations, losing loved ones, battles with the beastmen, hunting the mammoth animals, fighting the deadly predators, ceremonies and libations to the gods, and the revelation of star formations. They displayed the ancient symbol of life, the Ankh, at various points throughout the cold, dark, and musty cavern. It amazed me to see that the symbol of life was among these people. It was clear in their drawings that the crossing point was the last place before walking across the land bridge in freezing temperatures to the Asmonean world. The drawing spoke of unknown sea monsters lurking in the mysterious blanket of thick, frigid fog. The crossing had to be made quickly, for this stretch of land was always extremely cold, barren, and perilous. It could take a quarter of a day for a strong traveler determined to travel quickly across the barren land bridge in record time. I spent 2 weeks preparing myself for a marathon sprint across the barren wasteland. I watched carefully to see which animals were attempting to make the journey. The large mastodons and elks moved in groups of 20 to 30 members, instinctively traveling faster than normal speed. I accompanied a herd moving briskly through the blistering cold and the deep, thick fog, which offered limited visibility. Traveling closely with the elk and mastodon clans offered some warmth and protection from the unknown, but about midway, a gigantic, monstrous sea creature leaped out of the icy waters and with one bite took a large elk into the water. Upon witnessing this, the herds and I moved much faster, fleeing for our lives. Shortly after midday, we reached Casca, completely exhausted and searching for a place to hide from the land predators. The cavern spoke of the greater size of the monstrous predators in Casca, which may have been the reason many of the predators in Ghostland didn't journey to Casca. Competition for survival was much greater. The land of Casca, what we know today as Alaska, was unique, still locked in a more ancient prehistoric era, a land a time had forgotten, vast and full of deep secrets. For weeks and months I followed the path of the mastodons, who seemed instinctively to know where they were going. One day, while the great mammoths were grazing on the vegetation and drinking water in a nearby stream, I took the opportunity to replenish my food and water. However, my predator instincts alerted me to an approaching danger. A pack of 25 to 30 enormous black and gray wolves with red demon eyes. Switching to invisibility and taking refuge in a nearby tree, I could see how the predator pack encircled their prey and waited for the command of the alpha male to strike in full force. Other animals in the area alerted the mastodon herd to the danger as they fled. The herd moved with force and power. However, the wolf pack trapped an individual full-grown female, and with force and vigor brought her down and began tearing into her woolly body. She tried to fight back, but there were too many of them. I heard the cry of pain and death, which echoed for many miles in all directions. What happened next was astounding. A gigantic black bear, perhaps weighing 5,000 pounds, with legs and feet the size of tree trunks, casually walked up to where the wolves were having their feast, and I watched in amazement as the enormous wolves backed away from their kill, allowing the great bear to take their meal. Immediately, I mentally concluded, Batalis. That is Batalis, lord and master of this land. The leader of the wolf pack was furious about their misfortune. Bringing down a full-grown mastodon was not a simple task. More importantly, the entire pack was hungry and had been on the prowl for many days when they stumbled upon this herd. The alpha male watched in deep anger as Batalis consumed some of the best portions of the great mammoth. This was the strongest and largest wolf pack in Casca, and they were not going to just sit by and let Batalis take their meal. The pack encircled the great bear as he continued to eat, calmly observing the encroaching danger. Batalis stopped eating and turned his massive head to cast a penetrating stare on the leader of the pack, mentally telling him back off or prepare to die. The leader was moving in slowly, growling, and showing his large razor-sharp teeth, red eyes blazing like torchlights. As the entire pack continued to move in, Batalis stood up on his hind legs some 20 feet in height, looking down on his enemies. When the action began, it amazed me at how quickly Batalis moved with such power and strength against such a formidable foe. He came off of his hind legs and quickly grabbed the leader, and with one blow crushed his head against a large boulder, his brains splattering in all directions, instantly killing him. In vengeance and retaliation, the other wolves attacked him from all sides. The bear's thick skin was impenetrable, and with his powerful paws he clawed, ripped apart, and tore the flesh off of one wolf after another. There was no stopping Batalis once he had entered a battle. He thrived on the battlefield, and all of his enemies had to be destroyed if they dared to do battle with him. He could leave nothing standing but himself. I came down from the tree and moved in closer to the scene of the battle to observe the power of this dominant predator. There were moments in the battle when Batalis actually punched his adversaries, knocking some wolves out, and later killing them by ripping out their organs. Seeing their numbers decreased after nearly 2 hours of the bloody war, 7 of the remaining wolves decided they had had enough. Batalis was still standing. They could not bring him down, so they retreated into the forest. As they ran away from the battle scene, Batalis followed them at a slow but steady pace. Realizing what was happening, I grabbed my gear, food, and water and started following Batalis. Even as he left the scene of the fierce battle, large eagles and other predators came to feed on the remains of all the dead, defeated wolves. The stench was nearly unbearable, but to the scavengers, it was dinner time. Somehow, Batalis knew exactly which wolves he needed to kill, for he passed through the territories of other wolf packs, and he kept moving forward, many times just walking and taking his time. After following Batalis for months, the day came when he saw the 7 wolves walking in single file towards a herd of caribou. The crafty old bear sat down quietly and waited for the wolves to complete their hunt. The wolves took down a mid-sized caribou and began their feast. Batalis used stealth to get within a short distance from the wolves and then moved with lightning speed with a ferocious attack similar to what the wolves used on the helpless caribou. The wolf pack fought back, but another 5 of their members met a brutal death. The remaining 2 wolves headed for a nearby mountain range, and again, Batalis followed at a slow but steady pace. This puzzled me about the bear's behavior. Why does Batalis have to kill all the members of this wolf pack? He seems determined to not let any of them live. Deprived of their last meal and severely weakened by the battle, the 2 remaining wolves were on the run, trying to escape the persecution and wrath of Batalis. In sheer desperation, they headed to the Casca sand dunes, hoping that the great bear wouldn't follow them there. But they were wrong. When Batalis reached the sand dunes, he saw the 2 wolves struggling to cross the vast open hot landscape. Then suddenly the miraculous happened. Batalis disappeared and then reappeared directly in front of the wolves, blocking their path. The two wolves froze dead in their tracks and instinctively growled, letting Vitalis know they will fight to the end. With the swipe of each of his mighty front paws, the great bear knocked each of the wolves out cold. Several hours later, when the wolves awakened, they found themselves in a deep pit, the full moon shining brightly over the sand dunes. At the top of the pit was sitting Vitalis. The great bear mentally communicated to the wolves, "You are the last of your clan, and you will never again exist in this world as a wolf, as a dominant predator. You killed my mother and older brother many years ago. Afterward, you ate them and left the remains for the scavengers. I was just a baby cub hiding in a tree, afraid to make a sound. Left alone and without my family, I struggled for many years to survive. I swore that one day I would kill all of your clan." As Vitalis mentally communicated to the wolves his dreadful story, I could see the past life of the great bear through his language. So that is the beginning story of Vitalis. But how did he become such a powerful bear? As the moon shined ever so brightly, suddenly I witnessed something mysterious happening in the sky. Waves and streams of green, red, blue, purple, and white light flowed across the night sky, aurora borealis, like ripples on the river Hapi. The two wolves howled as loud as they could, hoping that the spirit of their ancestors would save them. "We will come back one day and take our revenge." They were the last of the red-eyed giant wolves in Casca. As they continued to howl and curse the great bear, Vitalis slowly buried them alive. Afterward, the great bear sat and observed the beauty of the night sky, and then began his journey home. I didn't fully understand what had taken place. However, I had to continue following Vitalis to learn more and wait for the opportunity to communicate. Unknown to me, Vitalis knew I had been following him for months, and when I grew extremely tired and needed to sleep under a large oak tree, the ancient bear knew it was time to have a mental conversation. He sat quietly waiting for me to awaken. When I came out of my deep slumber, I was shocked to find the bear observing me with great interest. It intrigued Vitalis that he could conduct mental communication with me. "This was a very dangerous spot for you to fall asleep. You were careless, and being careless in this world can cost you your life and your good fortune. Who are you, and why have you journeyed to this land? Speak the truth, for I will know if your tongue is wicked and false." I was nervous and felt cornered, but I knew that if the bear had wanted to simply kill or eat me, that would have happened while I was completely defenseless. As I spoke my words, it fascinated Vitalis that he could mentally see my movements through time and space. I told him, "My name is Aesop, and I come from the motherland. I have journeyed to this distant land to meet you and to merge our spiritual destinies. I come from a spiritual priesthood that has a sacred mission to merge our spiritual essence with that of a great predator on this planet. My destiny is to become one with your great power." Convinced that I possess strange powers, Vitalis listened patiently. "You interest me, human, when you speak. I can see your life as you have lived. Tell me more about your mission." I talked at great length about the priesthood, the motherland, the migrations, the prophecies of what we expect to happen in the millenniums to come. I told him the world will change in many ways. When the massive ice sheets melt, huge floods will follow. Land masses will undergo massive transformations, more humans will migrate, and many animals will become extinct. The great bear pondered his fate in the visions he witnessed in my mind. "My abilities and power are much greater than yours, and I have lived for thousands of years. Why should I merge my spiritual essence with you and abandon my dominion?" I stood up and disappeared, and then reappeared behind Vitalis. I possessed the power of a mentor as well, and could travel through various historical periods in Earth's history, reborn to live again, furthering the mission of life on this planet. For many eras, the human species will dominate this planet. We are the most evolved species in evolution. I will preserve your supreme power in me with greater awareness and expansion into other realms of existence. Together we will have more power, greater deception, greater strength, and greater universal knowledge. You will have eternal life. This did not impress the great bear. I already have eternal life. But you may offer something more that makes eternal life full of greater challenges and much more interesting. I didn't question the great bear. "I'm curious, great Vitalis. How is it that the wolf pack could not penetrate your woolen skin? You were nearly invincible against them. After the death of my family as a baby cub, I fled to a place high in the mountains, where most predators don't go. It took me several months to get there, moving carefully, hiding, and remaining undetected by the large predators. I was safe in the mountains and ate mostly plants, berries, nuts, and seeds. There was a special valley hidden in these mountains that grew an abundance of an amazing plant, orange in color and delicious with special vital powers. I feasted on this plant and learned that it was making me strong and powerful with expanded mental abilities. I spoke to my ancient ancestors who taught me the ways of a supreme warrior. I stayed in the mountains for over 20 years. When I left the sacred mountains, I went back home to begin my reign. As a scientist, I found this of extreme interest, and I told Vitalis. So that's the secret of this land that time has forgotten, the plant life. His response was a testimony to the power of this magnificent land. That and other things such as the water we drink and the special energy that comes from our sky when it presents the special colors you saw in the night I buried the wolves. This land increased my size, strength, and spiritual powers. I bowed and next communicated to Vitalis, "Well, great Vitalis, I realize you will not be making a quick decision about this matter. Until that time, I would like to be your guest, living in your domain and partaking in your wisdom." He said, "Yes, that will be necessary. You will be my honored guest. We will have many things to discuss and experience before I can make a final decision." For an entire year, I lived in Casca with Vitalis, drinking the special water and eating the rare plants. I learned many things about being a bear, and I taught Vitalis the life of a human. I communicated to him that humans are animals, with the exception that we have greater reasoning abilities, intuition, and a deeper spiritual acknowledgement of the universal intelligence that gave life to all living things. And of course, because of your extraordinary abilities, you have mentally penetrated areas beyond what most creatures in your kingdom can understand. That's why they consider you their demigod. Together we will be stronger, and our travels through time and space will provide you with expanded experience beyond anything you may have imagined. He pondered my proposition deeply. The expanded spiritual life you speak of offers the ability to rise to higher levels, experiencing more of the universal powers. I had a dream that these things were happening to me. I have finally decided to join you, to merge our spiritual powers. His proclamation gave me great joy. "When do we begin, great Vitalis?" He said immediately. I explained to him the scientific ceremony that would be necessary to join our spirits. "You will have to take a substance that will put you asleep while I perform a sacred ceremony that will join our spiritual essence. Your physical body will disappear and become part of my body, for we will be one." Vitalis nodded in agreement, fully trusting the process. "So be it, priest. I have chosen this destiny." And so it came to pass that the great Vitalis joined spiritual forces with a Kushite priest from the motherland. The transformation was astounding, and the harmony between our two spirits became a legend in the annals of the warrior predator priests of ancient Kushite history.